South Korea's Korea Meteorological Administration, KMA, publishes official special weather statement notices and warning criteria that explain how alerts are issued and what they mean. The KMA portal helps readers decode winter headlines by showing which hazard category is in effect, such as heavy snow or cold waves, and the thresholds that typically trigger an alert level. In practice, this matters because the biggest risks often come from consequences rather than the snowfall itself. Black ice forming overnight, reduced visibility, longer commutes, and a spike in slip and fall injuries. The KMA page is useful for non-Korean speakers because it sits on the agency's English site, so you can confirm the official wording and interpret district-level alerts without relying on social media translations. As a safety guide, treat a winter alert as a cue to slow down and build time buffers. If your area is under a snow or cold wave warning, assume roads and sidewalks may be intermittently slick even after the snow stops, especially on bridges, ramps, and shaded streets where meltwater refreezes. Prefer public transit when possible. Wear footwear with good grip and avoid rushing down station stairs. If you must drive, keep longer braking distance and reduce sudden turns. The portal's main value is that it turns vague headlines into concrete risk levels. You can see what type of hazard is being flagged, why it qualifies, and when the alert is expected to remain in force. That makes it a practical decoder for planning safer travel during Seoul area winter events. Smoke was detected at Jongno 3 Gai Station on Seoul Subway Line 1, prompting an evacuation and emergency response in a busy downtown transit area. The report said fire authorities received a call at around 2:41 p.m. on January 23rd that smoke was coming from underneath a train bound for Cheongnyangni as it passed through the station. Passengers were evacuated from the train, and officials reported no injuries. Even when incidents end without casualties, the immediate impact can be significant because Jongno 3 Ga is a key interchange area, and any interruption can ripple into delays, platform crowding, and missed connections. The case highlights how Seoul's transit system typically handles safety events. Remove passengers from risk, secure the scene, and coordinate with emergency services before restoring normal operations. For commuters and travelers, the practical takeaway is to expect short-term schedule disruption rather than long closures, but to be ready to reroute quickly. If you are moving through central Seoul, keep alternative stations and surface routes in mind, and allow extra buffer time when you have fixed appointments. Flights, KTX, museum entries. If an evacuation happens, follow station staff instructions, avoid pushing on stairs, and keep aisles clear for responders. Saving a screenshot of your route and key reservations can also help if you need to pivot on the spot. In most cases, the biggest cost is time, so plan with slack. For tourists, keeping calm and listening for staff directions is key, and having a second route saved on your phone can prevent missed meetups. South Korean authorities imposed travel bans on 3 civilians as they investigate allegations of drone flights connected to North Korea, a case that sits at the intersection of domestic law enforcement and inter-Korean tensions. The investigation was triggered amid claims that drones entered North Korean airspace, an accusation that can quickly raise security concerns because it touches military escalation risk and highly sensitive cross-border signaling. Travel bans are commonly used during investigations to prevent suspects from leaving the country, while authorities secure evidence, conduct interviews, and assess whether charges are warranted. The AP report frames the inquiry as part of a wider effort to clarify what happened and who, if anyone, played a role in any unauthorized drone activity. For foreign residents and visitors, the story is less about day-to-day restrictions and more about situational awareness. Security-related headlines can spike quickly, and they may be followed by extra official messaging around border-adjacent areas. Practical advice is straightforward. Do not fly hobby drones near restricted zones, military facilities, or sensitive infrastructure, and use official guidance for drone rules and geofenced areas. If you plan tours near the DMZ or other sensitive locations, confirm schedules with operators on the day, as operations can change with a little notice when tensions rise. Most importantly, rely on verified updates from established outlets, because security stories often generate fast-moving speculation online. Because the case involves claims from Pyongyang, follow developments carefully. Diplomatic statements may evolve, and domestic investigations can expand as evidence is reviewed. South Korea said it would repatriate 73 suspects tied to a Cambodia-based online scam operation in what was described as the country's largest single-case return of overseas scam suspects. Reuters reported that police believe the group stole about 48.6 billion won from 869 victims. A government special response task force for transnational crimes, bringing together the National Police Agency, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the National Intelligence Service, coordinated the operation. The suspects were expected to arrive at Incheon International Airport on January 23rd and be handed over immediately to investigators. Authorities said they would pursue recovery of criminal proceeds and trace hidden assets, suggesting a focus not only on arrest but on financial disruption of the network. For the public, the story is also a reminder of how modern fraud crosses borders. Scams can be run from overseas while targeting victims inside Korea through messaging apps, remote customer service scripts, and cross-border payment channels. For foreigners living in Korea, prevention steps are practical and universal. Treat urgent requests for transfers, crypto purchases, or verification fees as red flags. Verify identities through independent channels before sending money. And be cautious about sharing passport ARC images or selfies for verification. If you receive a suspicious approach, preserve evidence, chat logs, phone numbers, bank transfer records, because timestamps and account details can be crucial for investigators connecting victims to a specific operation. Authorities emphasize tracing proceeds, which matters because scam networks often disperse funds quickly through layered accounts and cash-out channels. South Korea's immigration authorities expanded online reporting for certain employment information change requirements through the HiKorea website, reinforcing the expectation that eligible foreign residents keep work-related records current. The official guidance explains that foreign nationals engaged in for-profit activities under specified visa statuses must submit employment information and report changes within 15 days of the change under relevant enforcement rules. Reporting is required at the time of initial registration and when key details change, and the guidance describes what the report includes, such as occupation, industry, and an annual income bracket. It also points users to HiKorea, including an e-application pathway, as the main submission channel. The notice references a pilot period, January 2nd to June 30th, 2026, during which authorities plan to accept either online submissions or paper reports at an immigration office, followed by a shift toward online-only reporting. For expats and international employees, the takeaway is simple. Treat job-related changes as an immigration compliance task, not just an HR update. The biggest risk is forgetting the 15-day clock during a busy transition, so set a reminder as soon as you sign a new contract or receive a formal role change. Keeping records aligned can reduce friction later when renewing a visa, changing status, opening accounts, or proving lawful residency for housing and travel. In short, the change aims to make compliance easier while making the expectation clearer. If you are unsure whether your visa status is covered, consult official guidance or the immigration helpline before assuming a change is too minor to report. Seoul Metropolitan Government announced a 100-day crackdown aimed at stopping illegal taxi practices that have reportedly targeted foreign passengers. The city said enforcement would focus on recurring complaints such as overcharging, ride refusals, and poor service. To make reporting easier for non-Korean speakers, Seoul highlighted a QR-based survey and reporting channel intended to reduce friction for visitors who want to file a complaint quickly. The city also said it plans to improve taxi receipts so they more clearly display surcharges and tolls, helping passengers understand what they paid and why. The practical value for foreigners is twofold. First, it signals the city expects documentation that can be acted on fast, so keeping evidence matters. Second, it encourages habits that reduce disputes. Prefer app dispatch taxis or official stands, keep the in-app record or receipt, and note pickup drop-off points and time. If you suspect an overcharge, report it promptly while details are fresh. If a driver refuses a ride, it is often safer to step away and request another taxi than to argue curbside. For newcomers, checking an estimated fare in a map app before the ride provides a baseline. After arrival, compare receipt line items: base fare, distance, time, surcharges, tolls. The announcement frames the crackdown as part of protecting the city's reputation with visitors and improving day-to-day convenience for tourists. In effect, it lowers the barrier for foreigners to report problems and gives enforcement teams a clearer pipeline of evidence for targeted inspections. If you travel often, keeping a note of the city's reporting channel in your phone can make follow-up easier if something goes wrong. Seoul City conditionally approved a BTS comeback show at Gwanghwamun Square in March, clearing the way for a large-scale event in the city center while attaching safety requirements. The report said an advisory panel agreed to the plan after a request from HiKorea and Big Hit Music, but set conditions such as preventing overlaps in exit times for performers and audience members and minimizing traffic disruption. HiKorea had previously said it plans an 18,000-seat concert at Gwanghwamun Square on March 21st and a separate event at Seoul Plaza for roughly 30,000 fans. The city estimated that as many as 100,000 people could gather across related events and said it would conduct inspections in the area to prevent inflated hotel prices and unfair business practices. BTS is also set to release a fifth album titled Ari Rang on March 20th, which could intensify travel demand. For foreigners planning a Seoul trip around late March, the implications are straightforward. Expect heavy crowding and congestion in central areas, potential pedestrian control measures, and higher accommodation pressure. Booking earlier and avoiding tightly scheduled downtown plans during the event window can reduce stress. If you are attending, arrive early, plan meeting points, and follow official guidance on entry to exit flows. Even if you are not a fan, be aware that major events in civic spaces can change transit crowding patterns and road conditions citywide. If you have to cross the area by car, expect possible traffic controls and consider shifting plans to earlier hours or different neighborhoods. Global markets coverage highlighted a sharp move in South Korean equities as the benchmark KOSPI briefly climbed above the 5,000 level, a symbolic milestone that drew attention amid broader risk sentiment. Crossing a round number threshold matters beyond the exact points because it shapes headlines, investor psychology, and short-term positioning. In market wrap reporting, such a move is typically discussed alongside the day's bigger drivers: expectations for major central bank policy, global growth outlook, and shifts in risk appetite that push investors toward or away from equities. For South Korea, a milestone print can also draw more global attention to Korea-linked funds, increase trading activity, and spur commentary about whether momentum is sustainable. The practical takeaway for foreigners living in Korea depends on your relationship to markets. If you invest locally, directly, or via ETFs, treat the record as a sentiment signal rather than a reason to chase prices. Consider diversification and time horizon before reacting to a single-day headline. If you don't invest, the news still matters indirectly because market mood can influence business confidence and the tone of economic coverage. Big market days can also coincide with heightened interest in exchange rates, especially for expats paid in foreign currency or sending remittances. The key is not to overread the milestone. Long-term outcomes still depend on corporate earnings, policy, and global conditions, and volatility can return quickly after celebratory headlines. As always, a single milestone day can be reversed by the next risk shock, so treat it as context, not a forecast, when planning finances or content. Service disruptions on Seoul Subway Line 1 have continued to appear as a variable, including incidents where trains temporarily skip certain stations during protest-related activity. Reports describe cases in which trains bypass stops rather than running the usual all-station pattern, creating confusion for riders who rely on Line 1 for commuting and transfers. Because Line 1 stretches across a long corridor and links multiple parts of the capital region, even a short, localized disruption can ripple widely, crowding alternative routes, delaying appointments, and increasing travel time for both residents and tourists. The core operational point is that the line may remain running, but your train may not stop where you expect. For foreigners and visitors, this can be especially confusing if you do not read Korean platform notices. Practical strategies help. Check real-time service alerts in your navigation app, allow a buffer during rush hours, and keep backup routes ready. nearby stations, a bus corridor, or a short walk. If your station is skipped, get off at the next stop where trains do stop and backtrack. Don't stay on a train hoping it will eventually stop at the missed station. When meeting someone, share live location rather than promising a precise arrival time. If you anticipate a morning commute on Line 1, consider transferring one stop earlier to reduce the risk that a single bypass breaks your whole route. The broader takeaway: Seoul Transit is strong, but localized incidents can create time-specific surprises on major lines. Copy-pasting the Korean name of your destination can help when asking staff or locals for the fastest workaround. Political debate around foreign labor has resurfaced in South Korea, with renewed public discussion about sectors that rely heavily on overseas workers, often including shipbuilding and other labor-intensive industries. In these debates, some policymakers and business voices argue that labor shortages make foreign recruitment essential to maintain production capacity and keep supply chains competitive. Others raise concerns about wage structures, workplace protections, and whether dependence on cheaper labor delays productivity improvements. The issue can become politically charged because it touches sensitive questions about minimum wage, regional employment, and the responsibilities of employers toward both domestic and foreign workers. For foreigners living in Korea, the immediate policy environment may not change overnight, but the debate matters because it can shape future reforms. Visa pathways, labor standards enforcement, sector-specific recruitment programs, and public attitudes toward migrant labor. It can also influence how media frames workplace incidents and how local communities perceive rapid demographic change. The practical takeaway is to watch official announcements rather than headlines alone. Political rhetoric does not always translate into immediate regulatory changes, but it can foreshadow shifts in enforcement priorities or eligibility rules. For employers and foreign workers, clarity on contracts, lawful working conditions, and reporting obligations becomes especially important when public scrutiny rises. In short, the conversation is a sign that Korea's labor market pressures are increasingly visible in national politics, and that policy choices here can affect both business competitiveness and the daily experience of migrant workers. For viewers, it's a classic policy trade-off story: growth and competitiveness versus fairness, integration, and enforcement capacity.